The morning of January 27th, 1945, dawned bitterly cold over the Italian countryside. A thick blanket of frost covered the airfield as Lieutenant Raimondo prepared for what would become one of the most remarkable combat missions of World War II. Born on May 2nd, 1926, this young Brazilian pilot was about to demonstrate why the P-47 Thunderbolt had earned its reputation as the most durable fighter aircraft of the war. Lieutenant Raimondo served with the 1st Brazilian Fighter Squadron, known as Santa Apua, hit hard, which had been integrated into the Allied Mediterranean Air Force. On this particular morning, he received orders for a dangerous ground attack mission that would push both pilot and machine to their absolute limits. The objective was clear but daunting: seek and destroy German Tiger tanks that had fortified positions throughout northern Italy, threatening the Allied advance. The mission briefing revealed the gravity of their task. Intelligence reports indicated that several companies of German armor, including the feared Tiger IV and Tiger II heavy tanks, had taken defensive positions around key industrial areas. These 60-ton behemoths, with their 88mm guns and thick armor, were the most formidable tanks in the German arsenal. They had already proven their worth in countless battles, and taking them out required either superior tactics or overwhelming firepower, preferably both. Raimondo's mount for this perilous mission was a Republic P-47D 25 Thunderbolt, tail number 19663. The P-47, affectionately nicknamed Jug by its pilots, was a testament to American industrial might and engineering prowess. At first glance, the Thunderbolt seemed almost impossibly large for a fighter aircraft. It was 50% heavier than the sleek P-51 Mustang and nearly twice the weight of the British Spitfires that would provide top cover for the mission. The heart of this aerial beast was its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial monster that could deliver over 2,500 horsepower when pushed to its limits. This power plant was so large that the entire aircraft had to be designed around it, giving the P-47 its distinctive barrel-shaped fuselage. But what the Thunderbolt lacked in elegance, it more than made up for in sheer destructive capability and survivability. Armed with 850 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, the P-47 could unleash a devastating barrage of lead. Each gun carried 425 rounds, giving pilots enough ammunition to, as one veteran put it, cut a German locomotive in half. For this ground attack mission, Raimondo's Thunderbolt also carried an additional 3,000 pounds of bombs and rockets. Remarkably, this was half the bomb load of a B-17 Flying Fortress heavy bomber. As Raimondo performed his pre-flight checks, he ran through the familiar routine that had kept him alive through numerous combat missions. Check the control surfaces, test the gun charging handles, verify the bomb releases, confirm fuel levels. The massive radial engine coughed to life with a cloud of blue smoke, settling into the distinctive rumble that P-47 pilots knew so well. At 0900 hours, Raimondo advanced the throttle, and his heavily laden Thunderbolt began its takeoff roll. Even with the cold morning air providing extra lift, the P-47 used nearly every foot of the runway before breaking free from the earth. He formed up with 12 other aircraft. His fellow P-47s would focus on ground targets, while the British Spitfires maintained air superiority above them. The flight north was uneventful but tense. The weather had deteriorated significantly, with low clouds reducing visibility to dangerous levels. This would force the ground attack aircraft to adopt extremely hazardous tactics, near vertical dives through the cloud cover to identify and engage targets before pulling up to avoid both the ground and the inevitable flak. As they approached the target area, the Spitfires climbed higher to establish their patrol pattern while the P-47s prepared for their attack runs. Raimondo pushed his stick forward, and his Thunderbolt nosed over into a steep dive. The airspeed indicator rapidly climbed past 400 miles per hour as he plunged through the murky clouds at nearly 90 degrees. Breaking through the cloud base at barely 1,500 feet, Raimondo had seconds to acquire his target. There, two Tiger tanks positioned near a crossroads, their long 88mm gun barrels tracking something on the ground. He released two 1,000-pound bombs and immediately hauled back on the stick, grunting against the crushing G-forces as the P-47 clawed its way back toward the clouds. The bombs found their mark. Both Tigers were engulfed in flame and smoke, their ammunition cooking off in spectacular secondary explosions, but the Germans gave as good as they got. The sky around Raimondo's Thunderbolt erupted with black puffs of flak. He felt the aircraft shudder as shrapnel tore through the right wing, but incredibly, the P-47 kept flying. The controls still responded normally. If anything, the aircraft felt a bit lighter and more responsive, though Raimondo attributed this to having dropped 2,000 pounds of ordnance. High above, the Spitfires engaged a flight of German FW-190s attempting to bounce the ground attack aircraft. The British pilots, veterans of countless dogfights, made short work of the threat, allowing the P-47s to continue their deadly work unmolested. Raimondo climbed back to altitude and set up for his second attack run. This time, his dive was even steeper and faster. The airspeed indicator showed 450 miles per hour as he spotted another Tiger taking cover behind a stone farmhouse. At 800 feet, he fired a salvo of high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVRs. The 5-inch rockets streaked toward the target, striking the Tiger's thinner top armor. The tank's turret lifted completely off the hull as the ammunition detonated. Again, the German flak gunners found their mark. Raimondo heard the metallic pinging of shrapnel against his aircraft's aluminum skin. A glance at his instruments showed everything still in the green, though he noticed a slight vibration that hadn't been there before. The P-47's legendary durability was living up to its reputation. Any other aircraft would have been seriously crippled by such damage. As he prepared for his third attack run, Raimondo failed to notice that the battle damage had affected his aircraft's weight and balance. The clouds had dropped even lower, forcing him to dive more aggressively to have enough time to aim and fire. This time, his airspeed indicator climbed past 465 miles per hour, dangerously close to the P-47's maximum dive speed. Through the gloom, he spotted his target, a Tiger tank positioned near a large industrial complex with a towering brick chimney. Raimondo aligned his gun sight and squeezed the trigger. All 8 .50 caliber machine guns roared to life, sending a stream of armor-piercing incendiary rounds into the tank's engine deck. The Tiger burst into flames, its crew bailing out of the hatches. As Raimondo hauled back on the stick to pull out of the dive, he realized with growing alarm that the aircraft wasn't responding normally. The excessive speed had caused a phenomenon known as compressibility. The air flow over the control surfaces had become turbulent, drastically reducing their effectiveness. The massive factory chimney loomed directly in his flight path. With the controls nearly frozen, Raimondo could only watch as his P-47's right wing struck the chimney at 465 miles per hour. The impact was tremendous. Exactly 128 centimeters, over 4 feet, of the right wing was sheared off completely. The clean cut was a testament to the speed of the impact and the solid construction of the chimney. By all rights, the aircraft should have immediately entered an uncontrollable spin and crashed. But the P-47 Thunderbolt was no ordinary aircraft. Raimondo felt the plane shudder violently and begin to roll to the right, but incredibly, it kept flying. He immediately pushed the throttle forward to war emergency power. The mighty R-2800 engine bellowed as it delivered 2,800 horsepower, the extra thrust helping to compensate for the missing wing section. Fighting the controls with all his strength, Raimondo managed to level out barely 500 feet above the ground. The aircraft was vibrating badly and pulling hard to the right, but it was controllable, barely. He needed to gain altitude and head for home immediately. Raimondo attempted to radio his squadron about the damage, but unknown to him, flak had severed his radio antenna. His calls went unanswered. Still, he managed to climb back toward the clouds, using every trick he knew to keep the crippled fighter in the air. He had to maintain higher than normal speed to generate enough lift from the damaged wing, which meant consuming fuel at an alarming rate. As he climbed through 10,000 feet, still struggling with the damaged aircraft, Raimondo spotted a group of fighters approaching from behind. Relief washed over him. Surely these were friendly aircraft coming to escort him home. But as they closed in, he realized something was wrong. The lead aircraft was lining up for an attack run. The Spitfire pilots, returning from their patrol, had spotted what appeared to be a damaged German fighter trying to escape toward the north. The unusual silhouette, caused by the missing wing section and the aircraft's erratic flight path, convinced them they had found a wounded enemy. The flight leader fired a short burst. Tracers flashed past Raimondo's canopy, and he felt impacts in the tail section. In desperation, he pushed the stick forward and dove out of the clouds, rocking his wings in the Allied recognition signal. The Spitfire pilots suddenly realized their terrible mistake. As they pulled alongside the battered Thunderbolt, they could hardly believe their eyes. How was this aircraft still flying with such catastrophic damage? The British flight leader flew close enough that Raimondo could see his shocked expression. With hand signals and by rocking their wings, the Spitfire pilots conveyed their profound apologies before turning away, undoubtedly to spread the word about the miraculous P-47 that refused to die. Now alone and with fuel running low, Raimondo faced the challenge of landing his crippled aircraft. The missing wing section meant he would have to maintain higher than normal speed all the way to touchdown, a dangerous proposition on the relatively short Allied airstrips in Italy. He calculated he had just enough fuel for one approach. There would be no go-around if he miscalculated. As the airfield came into view, Raimondo could see emergency vehicles already positioning themselves along the runway. Word of his predicament had somehow reached the base. He lowered the landing gear and was relieved to see 3 green lights. At least that system was still functional. The approach was unlike any he had ever flown. He had to maintain 120 miles per hour, nearly 30 mph faster than normal, to keep the damaged wing flying. The runway rushed up at an alarming rate. At the last second, Raimondo cut the power and hauled back on the stick. The P-47 touched down hard but stayed on the runway, the tail wheel slamming down as he chopped the throttle. As the aircraft rolled to a stop, Raimondo sat in the cockpit for a moment, hands shaking from the adrenaline and exertion. He had just survived what should have been impossible. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft, staring in disbelief at the damage. 4 feet of wing missing, hundreds of flak holes, damage from friendly fire, and yet the mighty Thunderbolt had brought its pilot home. The conventional military wisdom would have been to scrap the aircraft. The damage was so extensive that repair would require essentially rebuilding half the wing. But Raimondo had other ideas. This P-47 had saved his life against all odds. He insisted, pleaded, and eventually convinced his superiors to repair his beloved Thunderbolt. Over the following weeks, as skilled mechanics worked to rebuild his aircraft, Raimondo's story spread throughout the Mediterranean theater. He became something of a legend, the pilot who flew home on 1.5 wings. When his P-47 was finally returned to service, he requested to be assigned the same aircraft for all his future missions. Raimondo would go on to complete 50 combat missions in that same P-47, tail number 19663. Each time he climbed into the cockpit, he was reminded of that harrowing day over northern Italy when his Thunderbolt had refused to die. The aircraft seemed to have developed its own personality, its own determination to survive and fight. For his extraordinary flying skill and bravery, Lieutenant Raimondo was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of the highest honors given to military aviators. The citation spoke of his heroism and skill, but those who knew the full story understood it was as much about the incredible machine he flew as the man who flew it. After the war, Raimondo returned to Brazil, where he became a pioneer in civil aviation, applying the skills and discipline learned in combat to help develop his nation's growing airline industry. He would live a long and productive life, passing away on January 15, 1997, having never forgotten the aircraft that had saved his life. The legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt lives on today in its spiritual successor, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. Like its predecessor, the A-10 was built around a massive gun, designed to absorb tremendous damage and optimized for ground attack missions. The lessons learned from aircraft like Raimondo's P-47, that survivability and firepower were just as important as speed and agility, influenced military aviation design for generations. Lieutenant Raimondo's story serves as a testament not only to the courage of the pilots who flew these dangerous missions, but also to the engineers and workers who built these remarkable machines. In an age where technology often seems fragile and temperamental, it's worth remembering that human ingenuity once created an aircraft so robust that it could lose a significant portion of its wing and still carry its pilot safely home. The P-47 Thunderbolt may not have been the fastest, most agile, or most elegant fighter of World War II, but for pilots like Lieutenant Raimondo, tasked with the dangerous job of ground attack in the face of withering enemy fire, there was no better aircraft. It was, in every sense of the word, a flying tank, a juggernaut that could dish out punishment and absorb it in equal measure. And on that cold January morning in 1945, that legendary toughness made all the difference between life and death.